Welcome to everyone. I'd like to say thank you for coming. I'm Bruce Hoffman. I just stepped down as director of the gallery at Gravers Lane Gallery in Chestnut Hill, and the new executive director is Chloe Leperchant right over there. I've taken another role on at the gallery. I'm staying with them, but taking a less active role as far as leadership. Kate, down there doing the camera work, is the new assistant director of the gallery, and we are losing one of our favorite people, Joseph, to retirement. So that is kind of sad. But I want to just give a shout out to these guys because they were incredible. This show was supposed to happen in a space we had at 1213 Walnut Street in October, and right before Lanny was set to send all the crates to us, we lost the space due to a real estate issue. So that was one of the worst phone calls I've ever made in my life, to tell an artist that after a year's work, we can't show your work. I promised that I would find a space, and one day I was meeting my friend Rachel Zimmerman for an evening, and I just blatantly said to her, do you have anything available that we could do a show in? And she's like, well, I've got 3.5 weeks in the crane. And I'm like, before she could even finish, I said, we'll take it. And then I ended up having to come back and tell these guys that I just added a show to an already full schedule. So they were incredible in putting this all together. The team at InLiquid were phenomenal, are phenomenal. I thank you so much. You guys were just spectacular. And again, throwing in a show at you last minute, I know it wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but you did it with grace and elegance and professionalism. So thank you very much. And I would like to point out Nancy, Lanny's wife here, a driving force. She's the dervish of Washington State now. She kept him on getting his catalog done and keeps him in line. Yeah, but Nancy was here in Philadelphia for many, many years at Flesher Art Memorial, and we thank you for putting some wind underneath this man. I've known Lanny since, we weren't friends, but we knew each other in school. He was grad school, I was undergrad, and I remember seeing him working with these crazy materials, like doing these incredible sculptures. He happened upon a material that he is now still working with 40 some years later, experimenting, finding new elements within it, new types of mesh. But he was a sculpture major that kind of migrated into the fiber department at Tyler, and the then great Adela Akers was running that department, and she was an amazing woman about structure and texture and integrity, and I think she was a big influence on the direction of working with material. He also had a great teacher named Winifred Lutz that was one of my favorite teachers as well, who really knew how to guide a student into what they truly were inside. That she did not ever push you to do something that was out of your psyche, but she pushed you out of your comfort zone all the time. And I think the two of us both still hear her voice resonate within us. Lanny lives in Washington State and is very influenced by the incredible environment there. And the work, obviously, by the title of the show, Luminous Forest, it's kind of an homage or a love affair of nature and what you see in nature, and the microcosm, the macrocosm, everything that takes place, the biology, the structures, the pods, the wings. It's just a joyful homage to nature. And I think that's been part of your journey throughout the years, is figuring out structures, organic or man-made, but how we live with these structures and the beauty of structure and the subtlety of color. I think you've brought color back into your work that is really extraordinary. So without further ado, I would just like to, I could go on and on and on. I was trying to write things this morning, and I'm like, it just became a book after a while, because I know so many things, and I've done so many things with him. He's in museums all over the world, including Seoul and Poland and the National Gallery, the Smithsonian, the Renwick, the Woodmere Museum. It goes on and on and on. So he's very accomplished in what he has set out to do. So without further ado, my friend Lanny Bergner.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, it was kind of a little, Okay, we'll try the mic here and see how is that better? Yeah, okay. It's such a pleasure to be here, and it took this journey with losing the space this was going to be in, which would have been a much smaller space than this, and so actually it's turned out for the best. Even though at the time I probably didn't feel quite that way, but Bruce did promise and he came through, so I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for the staff here at InLiquid. They did a fabulous job of supporting the exhibition and helping to mount it, and that's really appreciated. And I'll just kind of do a little bit more background about myself. I grew up in Anacortes, Washington, and I was right now I live across the road from where I grew up. So I spent a lot of years away from the area, but really found out that that's the place I wanted to be. And so that's, and a lot of my influences are all the kind of natural world influences. And I'm also very interested in design and in sort of architectural things too. So it all kind of morphs together into the work that I do. And I sort of shift back and forth from kind of sort of more geometric things to then more organic and natural world things. So, and the works here were made about a year and a half. So mostly in 2024, because the show was going to open in November of 2024. Then I added only a couple of pieces since then, which is the one here in the middle, that kind of wing piece there, and there's a leaf over here, which were added. So other than that, this was the show that was going to be in November. And I went after high school, I was in the Air Force for 4 years, and after that, I went to the University of Washington. So that's where I got a bachelor degree in sculpture. So my background is really all in sculpture. I was doing fabricated steel work, bronze casting, kind of the usual things kind of a sculptor does. And then after that, which was back in '81, I went to Tyler, and that's what brought me to Philadelphia, was grad school. And there I was in the sculpture department. And again, I was working with fabricated steel work. I wasn't doing bronze casting at the time, but I was still kind of in the fabrication kind of area. But I was looking a lot at the fiber work. Teresa Janes, she was in that program, and they were doing some exciting work. So I started to kind of get interested in the fiber world through that. And Adela Akers, of course, and then Winifred Lutz, who really did, I don't know, she just tapped, somehow with me, I just tapped into it. And my work completely changed from the first year at Tyler to my second year. And that's when I started working with just insect screening. And so my whole thesis show at Tyler was just made out of window screening. And I was doing these kind of biomorphic forms. Some were suspended, some were hanging on the wall. So I just got really excited about, such a simple, cheap material that all I needed was a little flat-nosed pliers and a scissors, and I could make sculpture. And you could do it anywhere, and I knew I was going to be getting out of graduate school pretty soon. And I didn't really have the fabrication equipment or bronze casting capabilities and all that. So I liked the idea of just having a studio. You could do it anywhere, and you could make fairly large sculptures out of it. So that kind of started my journey here in Philadelphia. And I started showing right away at that time it was Marion Locke's gallery. So I was in their new talent show that year. And I ended up getting a job at the Fleischer Art Memorial, where I was gallery coordinator for 8 years. So, and I left, finally left Fleischer back in '94 and moved back to Washington State. So I just had this burning desire to move back home. So that's what I did. And when I was here, I was still kind of doing work that had references to the natural world, but not, there's also more of an urban kind of thing to my work. But when I moved back to Washington, I was more surrounded by nature. I lived out in the country. And so that became more of a dominant influence of what I was doing. And, you know, I've been working on that ever since. And I think it was about 15 years ago or so, I started working with stainless steel a lot. And a friend of mine asked me if I ever used a torch on stainless steel, and I said I hadn't. And so I started doing that, and that's when I started doing the torch work on stainless steel. And all the, like the back panels here, that's a stainless steel mesh that I use a propane and butane torch on. So that creates the patterning on the metal. And then after I do that, I do embossing using the drawing that I've done with the torch as a reference. And I just, also I work that very simply. I have like eye hooks, kind of large eye hooks that I then press into my hand to create the embossing. And it's a light enough material that it embosses really well just by doing that. So, you know, I don't need this really big setup to do anything. I just was using the palm of my hand and these eye hooks. And the leaves that are on there, ginkgo leaves and a few others, different types, that's copper mesh. And these pieces initially were part of 3 pieces without the leaves. It was part of the installation I did at the Bellevue Arts Museum. So sometimes I'll make pieces and then they also then evolve. You know, I have them in a show a certain way and then I'll add other things to them and then they keep kind of morphing into something else. And that's what's happened to these. Too, anytime you want to ask a question, please do, because this is going to be kind of an informal, just talk about the pieces. And so whatever like comes to mind, just feel free to pipe up, and we can talk about that. There's certain materials that you know, with the mesh, I've been working with it for so many years. I kind of come to other realizations what I can do with it, and that's what keeps the work kind of evolving. But I also kind of bump into other materials, and some of these I've used, so like silicone is one of those materials, where you might, you know, you use it for caulking your window, but you can also use it as a glue and create forms with that. And I've done pieces where I've used silicone and just pressed it through the mesh. I've you know, mixed powdered pigment with silicone to add a color element. And like the case of the piece, the suspended piece over here, the orange and the kind of the white balls, that's glass frit, which is a crushed stained glass and glued together with silicone and then attached to wires. So I'll combine those materials to be able to add color and elements to the work. And that's just kind of evolved over time. This piece on the wall here, this is another, you know, I use the glass frit for the kind of yellow balls, but I also have these geometric, kind of the linear parts. And for that I used powdered pigment mixed with acrylic medium. And I'll mix that together and then paint it onto the mesh to fill up the gaps of the mesh. And so the works over here, the suspended pieces, that's also that technique. I'll do that after I've done all the burning on the torch. And I apply that material before I actually form the piece, so it's kind of done flat. And again, it's a way of adding color to the work, because I want the color to be an integral part of what I'm doing, and not, you know, I don't look at myself as a painter. I work with structures and stuff, and you know, it's a way to kind of add a visual structural element, but add some color too, which just, I think, creates more of a richness to the work. And I'll add, in the suspended pieces over here, I've added some like frayed brass mesh, which the light hits it just right, it'll kind of pop out. And that's just another kind of element that I'll work with. And these are, you know, I'll kind of work in series. I'll get interested in a certain type of form, and then I might make 2 or 3 pieces where it's evolving that form. So one kind of informs the next one I do. And it's usually because I want to see, you know, I get kind of a vision to see the next thing. And so then I'll work that way for a while until I bump into something else, or I go back to something else that I want to take a little further. And I'll also, like this piece right here, that form is, this one right here, is an insect wing. I also have done several pieces where I'll scan like dragonfly wings or cicada wings, various insects. I might find a wing on the property or something, and we'll scan that and blow it up and use that as the sort of the patterning I do in the form, and then create the sculpture out of that. And the surface here is different than the other ones. That's the only one that has this, where I use the acrylic medium, just mixed with a little water, and then painted the mesh. I have to give it about 3 coats to cover all of the mesh. And it gives it kind of that sort of that insect wing quality, where it's that iridescent, and that's what kind of got me going on dealing with insect wings. So I realized with the thinness of the mesh and the certain qualities of it, you could make it kind of feel like an insect wing. And so that kind of started me down the road of making pieces like that. Yeah. No, it's not really pounded, it's pressed. Yeah, I'll, like this one here, you can see it's sort of embossed. And I'll, yeah, this one especially, I'll use a spline tool, you know, like you use for putting a screen in a screen door, and it rolls. And you can put that on it like a yoga mat is what I do. And then you can just roll that, and it makes the emboss on the mesh. And it doesn't matter if it has the coating on it. I'll coat it first, because the coating is basically as pliable as the stainless steel, so it works really well. And that's how I kind of, you know, you kind of start one way and then you realize, oh, I could use this, and it feels the same and it looks the same. Okay, I'll use this spline tool and do it on a yoga mat. And that's how some of this stuff kind of develops, and then you just kind of take it from there.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Do you have like an area that seems to be more things you feel closest to? Because I see sort of a district line between a more decorative work and then a more sculptural work. I just wondered.
I go back and forth. I'm just like interested in both things. And I just kind of allow myself to work that way. Like this piece up here, it started out as this kind of plumb bob form, which had the the torch work on there. And then I added the leaf forms, and I added sort of added the embellishments, I guess, and it became something different. So it's a way to kind of evolve a piece, because I kept looking at it, I feel like, well, it needs something more. So I just, over that piece was probably a couple of years to get it to that point. And I showed it at various stages. So, at one point I thought, well, this is done. Well, it wasn't really done. And I think it's done now, but maybe it's not. You kind of allow these things to develop over time. And if it doesn't go somewhere else, then you might look at it again later and decide you want to do something else with it. So I kind of allow those things to happen. And it's a way to sort of recycle your work, and also to take it to a different place that you didn't recognize at the time, but later, oh, okay, this seems right now, I need to do this. So, and the works that are back there, that particular technique, which is a strip, they're strips of mesh. And 4 of them are stainless steel mesh that I use a torch on to get the color. But that's a technique that I did back in Tyler when I was my last year of graduate school. A lot of my thesis show is made up of work that were done that way. And I stopped doing that probably about 3 or 4 years after Tyler. And then I came back to doing it in about 2003. And I did that for a series of years, probably about 7 or so. Gave it up again, went on to other things, and now for this show I made some more pieces that way, but using a different material, which was the stainless steel. So and to add other things to that. In the case of those pieces, it's a lot of knotted monofilament. As I found that when you go to a fishing place, there are all these different monofilaments, and they also have these fluorescent kind of monofilaments. I thought, well, that's a good way to add color to my work. And just by knotting it, just sitting there and knotting for hours and hours, you can watch TV and tie knots. But something happens over that length of time. And so, I made this series of work, which was, based on the knotting that I was doing, and then I created the form around it. And that's how a lot of those pieces were developed. So, but it was coming back to a technique that I had done years ago. And so I kind of cycle around. And then you come to it at a different place, and then you see it differently. The what is? The lighting. It's, it brings out, what's behind, what's around. It calls attention to a space, because you can look through one to another. Like over here, you can look through that piece there and see the one right behind it. And that's kind of always has interested me in my work. And even right after, the show I had at Tyler back in '83, those things were starting to happen then. And so I got interested in installation work. And I've done pieces that were more installation-like than this body of work, but it kind of led me down that path. So I like it's just like walking around in a forest or something, or you're on a path, you notice something. And that's in a relationship to something else. And so that's what I enjoy that. It's that kind of thing excites me. And so I like to look at art that way. Yeah.
Has anybody ever made the comment that they look like large pieces of jewelry?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of things. Yeah, and that's, yeah. Yeah, right, yeah, they are, yeah. Yeah, right, you blow them up. Yeah. Yeah, I've had, a lot of, there's a kind of meticulousness at how I work, I guess. So, I am interested in craft. you know, that is an important part of my work. And it's just probably part of my personality. And so I don't sort of shy away from that. And sometimes, you know, I've done kind of installation stuff that were more cruder than that, but there's usually a refinement in what I do, so, because that interests me. And I like I like repetitive kind of things. When I was growing up, my mother was a crocheter. So I don't think I ever saw her sitting in front of a TV without doing something with her hands. She was crocheting or doing some craft type work. And I would pretty much ignore all that. But, you know, I realized after going through undergraduate school and graduate school where I had all this fabrication equipment and all this stuff, really what I wanted to do is just to do something that my mother was doing. And it took me that long to kind of realize it, it's sort of I guess it's a comforting thing, that repetitive process that then leads to something. And I just, I kind of fell into that and then realized, well, if I do need to do something with my hands all the time and make art. So I kind of very seldom will just sit and watch like a TV. I'll be, either tying knots or doing something like that. So. Yeah, but I got it from my mother, yes. Yeah.
Really interested in your work. She lives outside the USA, and coming from the Middle East, specifically from Yemen, where craft and science have long coexisted in architecture and ornament.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always interested in mixing craft, sculpture, and science, like in your works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard part of that, but not I mean, I'll combine, I'm interested in, like science and space and as far as imagery from those worlds, like the piece over there is, like a lot of microscopic things. So there are all these kind of vague references to all of that. There's no, I won't say there is. It's sort of more of a vague kind of picture. So I think a little bit more like poetry, where where there's not a specific kind of story involved. I like combining those things, like the sort of the natural world and like the more geometric man-made world and the dualities and stuff that's involved with that, and not so much the separation of it, but trying to bring it together. And so that's what kind of interests me. So, I'll just kind of look and notice things, but for the most of these pieces, one piece is informed by the one I did before, and that just kind of leads me somewhere. And then I shift over somewhere else for a while, and then I'll come back to it.
There was a while there that you were found the gourds, and
yeah.
A lot of the glass grains were very colorful. They were almost aquatic, and everyone would reference them as sea rather than another environment.
Yeah.
How long did that last?
I started doing that kind of work soon after I moved back to Washington State. I started, I had a big garden and I started growing gourds. I just like, I like things hanging, and you could grow them that way, and I got kind of turned on by that. And I've always wanted to get more color into my work, and I'm, moving back to Washington State, well, it's a big glass area. There's a lot, Pilchuck glass and stuff. There's a lot going on there in the glass arts. And so I was just starting to be around that type of thing and in an area where I could grow something. So I started doing that. And they were really colorful. I mean, it was all color. And then what happened, I got cancer. Probably not from that, but, and I didn't work for about 3 months, and when I started working again, I started working with just black insect screening, and that was it, no color at all. So I got back to making these kind of plumb bob kind of forms that way. So it just took me out of that color world, I guess, that I was in, which wasn't exactly going in. I mean, it did kind of go somewhere, but anyway, it stopped that work at that point. And now I'm somewhere in between. I like having the color in the work.
The wing starts to bring reference to those forms you were doing that, that
yeah.
shape and
Right, yeah. I mean, with the wings, I just became very interested in the kind of iridescence and the fragility of it. Like trying to make sculpture out of metal, but appear to be just light and airy and, like have no, there's like no weight to it and all that. Now that interests me rather than the heavy sculpture. And I like that quality of it, and it just put me down that road of, and I liked all the structure of those wings with all the veining and stuff that's in a wing. And I'm still, the next body of work I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of revisit that a bit, so, because it still interests me. But they just keep evolving, I guess. I don't know if I answered your question at all. No, I did, okay. Good, thank you.
So do you use a wider armature inside that kind of piece, or are you making
No.
those edges fit the same?
Yeah, everything is, none of these pieces have any armature. It's all out of the mesh. In this case, there's 6 panels, like these here go up. And so you have to cut those out, and you fray off some of the wire, you bend it up, and everything's connected together, twisted together by hand.
And so is the same true of these wiry bits at the top?
That's, inside the wire is frayed wire from aluminum charcoal mesh. And then I wrap a heavier gauge wire around that to create these kind of tentacles that come out.
I feel really cohesive with the rest of that.
Yeah, that's the purpose. Yeah, that's what I like, everything has to kind of make some sense that way. I don't like things that just look like it's just added on and stuff. And that's like with a color too, it has to make some sense. And that's why to use it as a structural kind of thing or whatever, rather than just.
Project like some of the libraries you've done, do you approach that differently when you have a specific space that is going to be permanent installation?
Yeah, I don't do so much of those anymore, but yeah.
You've done a lot.
Yeah, I kind of prefer just working in the studio now and doing what I want to do, so, yeah. Okay.
I'm curious what your planning process is, in particular the more organic forms. Are you sketching out what form you're going to make or making something out of a different material, or do you just work directly with the mesh and decide as you go?
Yeah, it depends on the piece. These guys back here, I kind of started with the inside. I spent out, like the one that glows back there, I kind of spent days and hours just tying knots and making, I just knew I wanted this bigger kind of ball form. And then I created the outer casing. And like this piece here, inside it's a white monofilament that there's, you have to look closely at it, but there's straight pins that are bent, and then I dip the tip of those into a white or into red acrylic medium. And then I just tied knots to connecting all of that. And what I knew about that is that I wanted to have it stretched between the bottom and the top. So I had to make the casing to be able to do that. And so that's how that was kind of created. That spiral piece there, that's that kind of day glow kind of monofilament. And I just kind of knew I wanted some type of spiral. So I just made sure I tied enough that I could do that, and then I created the piece around it. Some of these other ones, like these, are more planned out. Because I cut out the bottom part. I knew I wanted this kind of shape. I did all the torch work and these kind of geometric areas. I did that flat. And I drew that out first. So they're very plotted out. These are. And so I'll kind of, work different ways depending on the forms I'm working with. Yeah. Question?
So I have met a lot of scientists or engineers who have an art practice, and I'm wondering, since your work is so ecological and sort of scientifically minded, I'm wondering if you, as an artist, have a science practice. Like, is there something that you do? You mentioned gardening, but
yeah.
Is there something you collect, or something that you think really informs your work outside of your craft?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I do the gardening part. It's I've had scientists look at my work and really enjoy my work because of that kind of quality you're sort of talking about. I don't really specifically, I've done projects before where I did like this hospital piece in a neuroscience area. So I would research what forms I could do with the torch that could be like synapses and different things. So I'll do that. And that's always kind of fun because it can kind of take you places and stuff. So, and I'll, or just, I'll bump into these microscopic worlds that then I can envision making sculptures out of that to be part of it. Like some of these were that way. Like the burn forms here is like looking at microscopic images and then introducing that into the work to give it another visual element and stuff. But I have no real scientific background. I don't have a math background. I flunked in high school. But because of what I do with my artwork, I use a fair amount of math. So I had to come to that through artwork, but at the time when I was in high school, I was really horrible. But yeah, yeah.
I was interested in the torch work.
Uh-huh.
Is it on these?
Yeah.
And are you actually like drawing with the torch to create the?
Yeah, it's all freehand, but you use the torch to, create the drawing. So I didn't, I've kind of worked different ways that way, but in the case of these, this was all just the torch, and you like an abstract expressionist painter with your paint, but I was using a flame to do that. And so I wasn't following any design that I put on the mesh first. It was all done with the torch. But like some of these other pieces, like this here, the background part, I drew that on a piece of paper first, and then I transferred it to the mesh using a Sharpie. And so several, like the more geometric pieces, that's how those were done. And so I kind of go back and forth from the more gestural, abstract kind of things to something a little more that I transfer then to the mesh itself and then burn that out. Yeah.
I'm interested in that case. It reminds me of the beehive. Did you inspire it with the beehive, like certain shapes?
You're talking about the hanging one there? Yeah, that's, I've done quite a few pieces over the years with, I think of those like plumb bobs, but also figurative. That's kind of that combination of those two things. And so that was sort of the inspiration for that kind of work. And I've done it in various materials too. As it's like finding where that image first came to me was my brother was an engineer, and he had a plumb bob, you know, and like a gold plumb bob, and I was kind of fascinated with that little plumb bob when I was a kid. So that was just a memory that was in my head, and so I started playing around with that kind of form.
One other thing.
Yeah.
The space that it was supposed to be shown in was very much specifically designed for this small space.
Yeah.
Have you had a revelation of seeing the work here in relation to not being in a confined cocoon environment?
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's a much different experience because I can imagine this work in a space that would probably be that space. Yeah. What interests me about that space was that whole space was painted that color there, I guess, or close to that color. So I liked the intimacy of it, and the color of it. I knew that my work would look very good against that kind of wall and stuff. And so it would be hard to have this many people in that space with the work, and it would have been kind of crowded, but also more. It would have been a more sort of immersive experience, I guess, in that space as opposed to here.
Walls, they would have been absolute walls in that space, and here they become objects.
Yeah, so it's a much different thing. But I think I also knew it could work in either type of space. It's just a little different experience. So I didn't really, like I said, I only added 2 pieces for this show from what I initially envisioned. So yeah, I'd been curious to see what it would be like being in a dense forest in Washington. So.
I think this has been the more successful.
I'm really happy with how it looks here. And you can play with the different parts of the space. So whereas there, we would just been in it. That's it. And you look around and bump into everything, and
Lanny, do these panels hang?
They hang on the wall. So, but they aren't free hanging, but they could be. Yeah, they would be fine free hanging too. Yeah, I've done pieces that they actually weren't embossed like that, but they were hanging screens that you would, they would be hanging in the middle of the floor, and like 11 of them or something, so you could walk in and among the pieces. So.
So do you ever make any bad work?
Oh yeah, I mean.
There's such precision in you, just like they're gems. And so it's kind of like on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that maybe not bad, but things that I might be happier with than others, or you see it a little different later and you change it a bit or whatever. So yeah. But.
No, we never released the bad piece.
No, there's a certain kind of energy.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think it was pretty good. The amount of information in a short period of time is pretty incredible.
Okay.
I'm thrilled that you were able to make it here and do this for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. And feel free to just ask me anything later. So. Huh?
Give you my card.
Oh yeah.
Stay in touch.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. I actually do have a card myself.
Yeah.
Usually I always forget those.
I know, my